Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us. Rebecca Margolick is a dancer and choreographer based in New York and raised in Vancouver, Canada. Her solo and multidisciplinary works have been presented in Turkey, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Germany, France, Costa Rica, Poland, Bulgaria, Israel, and around the US and Canada. She was named Top 25 to Watch in 2021 by Dance Magazine. She's been commissioned to create original works on many companies around the world, and she's received fellowships from the New Directions Choreography Lab at the Ailey School, the Connie Conference, and a LABA Fellowship at 14th Street Y in NYC, to name but a few. She was dance artist in residence at the Banff Centre for the Arts and has had residencies through the Dance Deck in Vancouver, BC, La Galerie Chorégraphique in France, BC Movement Art Society, and was a 2017 GPS Fund Movement Research Artist in residence at Derrida Dance Centre in Sofia, Bulgaria. She has worked with a number of artists, including Annie Rigney, Belinda Maguire, Kayla Farish, Maya Ochin, Shay Kubler, and Barack Marshall, among many others. Rebecca is an artistic associate of BC Movement Art Society. She graduated from New York University Tisch School of the Arts and trained at Arts Umbrella. I'm delighted to introduce Rebecca Margolick. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me. This is really lovely to get the opportunity to talk with you and for our listeners to get to know more about you. And I believe you've just come from a rehearsal right now, have you?
Yes, yeah. I just got back to the hotel.
Yeah, and you're in Oregon, is that right?
Yes, I'm in Portland.
Okay. And you're working with a ballet company?
Yeah, I'm working with Oregon Ballet Theater, and I just started yesterday. So it's a new creation, and it's like, oh.
That's so exciting. How many dancers are there with you?
I have a cast of 5.
Okay.
And it was also the first time I've ever had to cast anything, which was really painful. Yeah, it was really hard, and I've never been in that position before. So today was a bit of a rough day for me that way.
Do you know them? Do you know the dancers anyway? No.
I've never met them until yesterday.
So was there kind of did you have to kind of audition them yesterday?
Yeah.
And then kind of just go by intuition and obviously just from like a chemistry or something, like with you and them in the room. Yeah.
That's the really hard part is it's like chemistry, how they move, but then some people, it takes a couple days to get the movement into their bodies, and then then they really surprise you. And so it was really tricky. So I just kind of went with instinct and yeah.
And I think what's great about possibly I would think that on a ballet company, once they have it as rep, potentially other people could dance it, right, in the company.
I would love that. Yeah.
So always a possibility. Okay, that's really good. Okay, so we've started with today. You're in a new zone, and I'm sure you're in many new zones often, the nature of the freelance life, but especially with you and with people who have multiple roles and carry over multiple roles. So I wonder if we can, for the listeners and also for me to know about you and your background, just to kind of almost start at the beginning of your dance path, your training, your move to New York, and like whatever you'd like to tell us about your kind of the beginnings, the origins of your dance career.
Yeah. So I grew up in Vancouver and trained at Arts Umbrella. I was there pretty much through my whole childhood. My mom also taught at Arts Umbrella. Mm-hmm. So I was there literally as a baby.
Mary Louise Albert, who we'll talk about.
Yes, Mary Louise Albert. And then at grade 12, I was debating whether to stay and do grad at Arts Umbrella or go to university. Mm-hmm. And I really felt like I wanted to have a university education as well. So I got into New York University. I studied there it's a 3-year program. Mm-hmm. So I got my BFA in dance, and also a minor in child and adolescent mental health studies, which was a nice
Oh,
like addition.
yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. And then afterwards, I was really fortunate to have a job right away, a freelance job with Sidra Bell in New York.
Hmm.
And I danced with her company for about 4 years. And throughout that, there was a lot of collaboration, a lot of improvising. And I kind of knew that I always also wanted to choreograph. So then my first like choreographic professional gig was a fellowship through LABA in New York at the 14th Street Y. So it was a fellowship for Jewish artists. And my ex partner and I collaborated on a multidisciplinary piece. And we would meet as a group once a week, and LABA would support the development of this piece. So, yeah, from leaving Sidra into moving into that phase, I knew I wanted to choreograph. So, I created this pretty complex multidisciplinary piece.
Mm.
And then that was incredible, but I was like, that was so much. I'm going to make a solo now,
Yeah, exactly.
which, which is a lot, but in a different way.
Mhm, absolutely. Logistically, like a little easier, perhaps. Like, but yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit more lonely.
Yeah, exactly. Harder emotionally, but like easier financially.
Yeah. Time wise, as long as you're motivated enough to actually do something, then that's, yeah, fabulous.
Yeah.
So, was it your? It seems that you've had quite the career of travel as well, and you've gone to lots of different places in the world. And has some of those as a dancer and some of those as a choreographer, or is that how it worked?
Yeah. Lately, mostly as a choreographer.
Yeah.
I have toured as a dancer as well,
Yeah.
but a huge plus about being a solo artist too is that it's easier and financially more feasible for smaller venues and smaller festivals to bring me. So I've kind of made a career out of that
Hmm.
and being able to be more flexible that way. And that's a big reason why I've been able to travel so much. Is I've kind of just taken almost all travel opportunities that have come.
Hmm.
I love it. I'm comfortable being on the road. I'm comfortable moving around. So, yeah, I have the right temperament for like a nomadic lifestyle.
Free spirited life, like
Yeah.
almost, yeah. I'll perform anywhere, she says.
Yeah, literally, I
So
will.
yeah. And I've noticed that with them, with some of your performances, the size of the festival really varies as well. The size of the spaces, or the seasons, or the series that you are part of, they tend to be very different in size. And I'm wondering if some of those, it seems like a lot of people who've danced in companies make really great connections when they travel with companies in different spaces for their own work, like understanding that maybe the environments will be different for their own work to the ones that they're in with companies. And I love that. I think that's a really beautiful, healthy, creative way of traveling and having a life as a dancer for companies that are maybe a larger scale, and still having a sense and a spider sense for, where your own work might live and breathe in those places that you travel. So it's kind of really making connections and networks, but also keeping your own creative, not dreams necessarily alive, but almost strategically making sure that, you have your independent life as an artist as well growing, which I think is really huge. And I think that's brilliant advice for people listening. But how do you manage it was one question I have. And also, I would love to talk at the same time of managing that. There's also the balance of dual residency, which you may or may not have now, but in terms of living in two places, US and Canada primarily, not only do you live a nomadic life, you also talk about being based in two places. And so, if ever you were to have evidence of that nomadic thing, you can't, the two places are your home. So I'd love to know, and I'm sure listeners would love to know, how your experiences of the two places, but also how you manage that, and what it means for you to be based in both places. So there's an emotional connection there, I think, and a personal connection as well, which is lovely, to both place and people. And I just think it might be really nice to just spend a bit of time, hearing about your perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, there's no way for me to not get personal in answering this
Yeah.
question too.
Yeah.
Yeah, New York, well, going to school there and spending so much time there, to me, New York really feels like it's like my home, like my adult home.
Yeah.
It's the place where I can go out and go to a show alone and know that I'm going to run into people I know.
Mm.
So it's like, it feels like that kind of community. So I was really based there really up until COVID.
Oh.
And then in COVID, my ex and I moved out of the city, and we both were kind of nomadic for a while because we didn't want to pay rent. So we lived at his parents' place and in outside of New York, and then I went back to Vancouver for about 6 months.
Hmm.
So that's kind of when the idea of coming back to Vancouver more and having dual residence started.
Right.
And I still feel like really tied to Vancouver. I feel really tied to BC also. Like my parents live in Soantula, which is about like 8 hours by car and boat from Vancouver.
Mm.
And I go back there a lot. And that has felt like a spiritual family sense of home.
Ah, nice.
And now managing dual residence is very tricky because, and it's all coming to a head right now because basically I knew that I wanted to move back to Canada at some point,
Hmm.
but I wanted to have my American citizenship before doing so.
Hmm.
And I had my green card. So you have to be in the country 6 months out of every year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I was still basing in New York. And then I recently just got my US citizenship, and now I'm going to be moving back to Vancouver and actually more basing myself in Vancouver.
Hmm.
So it's bureaucratic logistical stuff and like personal emotional stuff as well. It is tricky though. It is hard. Like there becomes a point where you're kind of in like how to maintain ties to community while not being there.
Yep.
And at a certain point you have to like reignite those ties when you go back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tricky, to be honest. It's actually a very tricky thing because at some point you feel like, how much am I in a community or how much am I just like floating between communities?
Yeah.
So
Well, I think you've changed the terms, right? And it's changed its role in your life. Like
yeah,
but I think also the citizenship has been really important strategically for the amount of work you can get and the amount of work you are getting in the States.
absolutely.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that means. I know somebody else who has to file taxes in both countries, who has to all of the. So that I know it sounds a little boring, but it's the pragmatic side of the like with the emotional, spiritual, social wanting to connect. There's also the absolute bare bones practicalities of it, and it's not necessarily ever going to be easy to maintain that. However, because you get work in the States and because you do still have ties and you're making new ones all the time, it is absolutely worth it for you.
Yeah.
And I think there's kind of a really great lesson in that, because it's still dance. Like you're working with dance companies in the States whenever you go work there. And so spiritually, you've just kind of opened up to the American arts scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that must be a challenge as well. I mean, I've kind of got 3 or 4 prongs going on here. Whereas the pragmatic side, but there's also how you get work in the States, but how it works for you to be, so your citizenship obviously makes it easier for those companies too to hire you over somebody
Mhm.
else. But how does that work for you? Like what do you have to do in order to make those contracts, real?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I
Well,
know.
first, I just became a US citizen 2 months ago.
Yeah. So
It's super new.
young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anyone has a great accountant that works cross border, please let me know.
Yeah, this is a really good ask. Yeah. A
Yeah,
request.
especially on the Canadian side.
Excellent.
So that's the bureaucratic side of it.
Yep.
Nightmare. But I know a lot of people have dealt with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of getting work in the States, it's interesting. I'm going to see how it is moving forward, because this is now, the last time I was in New York was mid-March,
Mm-hmm.
and I might not be going back for work until November.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the longest I've been away, not
Yeah.
working there,
Yeah.
my whole time since moving. So I'm going to see how it is moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like, incredibly, this last year, actually, like, quite a few American opportunities came through.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working on a duet with a dancer in New York, Tushrik Fredericks, who's a really good friend and colleague. And we got a big grant from a foundation called the Trust
Mm-hmm.
for Mutual Understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had residencies in Sofia and Zagreb.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
And yeah, and then Tushrik got a residency at Brishnikov Arts Center. So then we were working in New York City for a month.
Mm.
And then this is the American system. It's all private foundation money.
Mm.
Because then randomly I got reached out to via my website about a foundation grant. Super obscure. I couldn't find much information about it, but they wanted me to apply with a proposal to fund a new piece. So I
Mm.
applied for Tushrik and we got it.
Mm.
So, like, ironically, I've been a bit out of the States more this year. And like now, these are the biggest US grants I've ever gotten or
Mm.
have just come in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like been a good year for like American getting work in the States,
Yeah.
but I'm going to have to see how it is moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's wonderful that there is that flexibility, there is that adaptability, and the connections are, and the work, and people are reaching out to you to want to fund, or like, letting you know about foundations and things like that, which is really important. And I think, more
Yeah.
and more we're going to have to be doing that in Canada anyway. And actually,
Yes.
for me in the UK, it's the same. Like across the two countries, it's more and more necessary, and that's just the direction it will have. Arts funding in general will be going. So
Yeah.
you're ahead of the curve there.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, it was really like surprising. Like I think that's when I felt like, okay, and you never know if it's gonna last when people reach out to you, but just kind of the past year, 2 years, like people reaching out to me, I've just been like, oh, I guess I have been doing this, have been choreographing for like 8 years now. Like I guess maybe it's time that like I don't have to always, you know, I still have to reach out, of course, but yeah, that was kind of the first time that it's happened towards me, and that felt really amazing.
yeah, that is it's really great. And you're kind of prepared enough to be able to take on, the projects, and many projects. So I'm thinking about collaboration. And so, but I'd also, if you can, I wonder if you can pinpoint why you felt you wanted to choreograph. Like, I always knew I wouldn't wanted to be a choreographer, or I wanted to choreograph, but I also kind of for a while said, when I was first getting my graduate degree, I said that's the one thing I would never do. But I knew that I would teach, I would perform, I would do all of these things, but I would never choreograph. But I just knew at that time that it meant so much to me that it hit me harder if things weren't working, or if I just kind of enjoyed it, but it took everything out of me. And so, I put everything into it. And so it meant so much to me every single time I choreographed. And I kind of always knew that that would be my love, my passion would be that. And composition is more my passion now than choreography.
Hmm.
But do you have a moment when you knew, like, were you dancing and you knew, or do you think you started dancing because you wanted to be a choreographer? Like, I'm just always interested in that, relationship,
Oh,
whether it comes from the outside or the inside, whether it's a bit of both playing on you, do you
that's
know?
such a great question. I feel like first and foremost, I'm a dancer to my core,
Yeah.
and like performing is still so important to me. But there came a point, and maybe it actually came from and you know what, it probably came from childhood, because like I'm actually my brain is jumping to like earlier memories of dancing in the living room and choreographing pieces in front of the mirror. And but more in that it was like a fantasy. Like I would close my eyes and I would like dance in my head.
Mm.
And I still feel like that is still the root of when I make work. it's like what are the ideas that keep like coming up when I like close my eyes and like imagine a work or imagine a world or imagine a feeling, or so I guess it's both. And I
Yeah.
think like professionally it was as I was dancing and I was like wanting certain things to happen or wanting to make different choices than
Hmm.
what was being proposed. And not that I didn't think what was being proposed was fantastic. It was just like I had ideas that I was like, oh, what if this was this? What if that was that? What if we kept going? So, yeah, I guess there's no specific moment. I made a piece in college and I looked back on it recently and I was like, this was kind of pushing, like, it was like pushing boundaries. It was random. It was weird. I went with all my like just instincts.
Mm.
And it was cool to see that and be like, oh, yeah, I was kind of just trying stuff.
Yeah,
And yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
that's really cool. I love
yeah,
that because I feel like that's the same for me. There were moments where I thought I was kind of doing what somebody was asking of me, but there's just an element of taking it a little bit further into my realm, into my world,
yeah,
that was just a bit of a kind of a warning sign that I was prepared to take it in a certain direction and interested in taking it in a certain direction, and would pull back in whatever scenario I was in from that,
yeah,
but would be so curious about what that might be that I would have to go and explore that as well. And I feel for me, and this might be similar for you, but the interdisciplinary aspect of things, when you're world building, like you have more of an opportunity to do that, I think, as a choreographer, to kind of build the world as opposed to be in a world and be a character or help bring a world to life, or to realize a world that somebody else is building. Like, you
yeah,
have the opportunity to world build, I think, as a choreographer, more so than as a dancer, although I'm happy to for people to prove me wrong on that. But like, I know many dancers who absolutely build worlds, and I want to be in their world inside the work. So,
yeah,
but I feel like that's where the flip of the coin is, or something, and that's where the perspective shift is for me a little bit. So I wonder if maybe, without jumping too far off that track, but into the interdisciplinary and
mhm,
collaborative world and the co-creation worlds, that's an affinity I have, and I think that means something to you, a lot to you, in the terms of being able to create with collaborators. And so it kind of expands the choreographer dancer collaboration world out into that idea of world building.
yeah,
So, could you talk a little bit about that and your experiences of that, maybe?
yeah.
It's also part of your dance lab as well, right? The whole
Yes, it is.
interdisciplinary
Yeah,
thing. So you can feed that in if you like, or we can talk about that later. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that first piece I made was like
Yeah.
two. The mistake was I was in it, but it was the
Mm.
not mistake, but
It's
it
always
was
tough,
the
though. Yeah.
yeah, it was tough, but it was affordable.
Yes. That word again. Hey-ho.
Yeah, it's crazy how like it all feeds in. So it was myself and a dancer, and then three musicians, live musicians on stage, and then like video, interactive video
Mm,
projection. And I think what I loved about it so much was just like looking at the way in which these different mediums, like at which point is something major, at which point is something minor, at what point do they complement each other, at what point is it distracting. And then
mhm.
it feels like, and I've said this a lot recently, and it's a bit ridiculous, but I feel like when building a world or building a piece, you feel like you're building this like monster. And eventually the choices you make are in service to the monster and not to just like, not as much in service. It's still you, but it's like, how do you feed the monster to keep it going, to have it make sense, than to just be like, oh, I want this, I want that. And I love that part. Like it feels like this puzzle. And I feel more so, especially with interdisciplinary work,
Yeah.
that comes up. Yeah.
I love that because I think about that as like the work speaks back to you. So you're
Yes.
in conversation with the work, and so you have to give it the opportunity to speak back, and you have to listen, and you have to be aware of how you are hearing it, or like, how you are seeing, how you are, for me, I call it looking as listening, because I just feel like it's like
Mm.
that's a really important space, especially like you say in the interdisciplinary worlds. You just got all of your senses going, and you're not necessarily trying to overanalyze, but you are definitely, I love major minor. That's a really beautiful way of, for me, describing it. I sometimes do it as kind of zooming in and zooming out, or
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
foreground, background, but they're all the kind similar kind of senses. But a major minor is really lovely because it's got that sound element to it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if in your dance lab, I believe you're going to be working with surround sound, aren't you? Like in the
We're
space,
I'm like eventually,
ideally.
yes, but I think in the studio we won't
It's hard to
be
set up.
working. Yeah, it's hard to set up.
Yeah.
But also, I should mention the major minor. As I said it, I've borrowed that from Andrea Pena, who's a good friend and another
Oh, great.
choreographer. Yeah,
Yeah,
she
who's
says that
also
a
going
lot.
to be choreographing with Ballet BC, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
in the next season. So that's wonderful. But yeah, I mean, we get them from, well, Monster, I was thinking Little Shop of Horrors. So there you
yes.
go. So,
Yeah, there's a point when you're making a piece, like I always have this moment, and it's like with love that I say this, but I'm making a piece and I'm like, oh no, this is what's happening. Like you see it coming together and you're like, oh no,
I know.
what's happening?
What's happening? How am I? Where am I sometimes? Where am I in this?
Yeah.
Where am I? How do I continue to contribute to something, especially if the dancers are amazingly powerful and creative and wonderful, and and you can be seduced by them. It's like, how do I continue to contribute to this? And like, how do I
Yes.
continue to kind of build this with them? And like, how do I, and what is happening, what is emerging? And that's like, yeah, that's very exciting. That's good.
Yeah.
So is it a multidisciplinary piece that you're doing with the ballet company right now, or is it straight up,
No.
it's straight up formal?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Super formal. It's a really quick process.
yeah.
I just basically have this week
Oh,
and like next week, but not full days.
yeah,
And then we're in the theater the week after, and I'm making like a 17-minute piece.
yeah.
So it's extremely fast.
Yeah, which is amazing and a very exciting opportunity to have. I love those places as a choreographer where you have your own work that might take years,
Yeah.
and you're like going, and then you have these, kind of quick processes which are really, really vibrant and lively, and where you're kind of skill developing and using all of your tools, all of the tools you have. So,
That's exactly what it feels like. It's like, yeah, skill developing, going with instinct,
yeah.
and like just creating on the spot.
Hmm. Yeah.
I prepped a lot for this piece, and which helped a lot.
Yeah.
But
Necessary, I think. Yeah.
yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah.
I was at Arts Umbrella before this, and I created a piece on the oldest
Oh, great.
dancers there.
Yeah.
And similar thing, but I came into that one, I had a bit more time for that one, but I just came in and I just went with instinct, and it was super fun, and they were so wonderful to work with, and same with OBT, they're so wonderful to work with. So I
Great.
feel comfortable like trying things out, making movement up on the spot, like the happy accidents are happening, which are so fun. It's like we're all in this place of not knowing,
Yeah.
but the not knowing time frame is like a lot shorter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you all know what to do in that space of not knowing, right? It's coming back to what you were saying about improvisation in your early days, and how, and
Yeah.
Cedar Bell and all those companies, and how important that is, and how much you kind of enjoyed doing that. So you haven't let that go, which is great.
No, no.
So, could you talk a bit about some of your previous collaborations? I know you've worked with a few people, Livona Ellis as well. They're
Yeah.
here, and I saw your duet, and yeah, a
Oh,
wonderful
nice.
duet together. Yeah. So, and I know you've worked with other people, and I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about those processes, and maybe how you come to collaborate with those people. Maybe you've danced together before. I think you trained with Livona, maybe even way back. So there's a beautiful one there. I'm just getting into a little bit of kind of relationship building things. So we
Mhm.
might also, if you're okay, talk a little bit about you and your mum,
Yeah, of course.
and that history, and also present,
Yeah.
the present way in which you're working together. So yeah, are there any kind of, at this moment in time, at this moment of us in this interview, because I'm sure you've had many relationships you could talk about, but the collaborative things that spring to mind that you'd like to talk about how they came about and what works you made together.
Yeah. This has been, I keep joking that like this year has been the year of duets. So
Right.
they've all kind of happened at once. So I have that duet with Tushrik in New York.
Yeah,
And then Lavana and I have our duet in Vancouver, which we're still developing and will be premiering, we'll see, like this year or next year,
great.
but ideally this year. And in those situations, it's been both two people who I'm extremely close with. So Lavana and I trained together, but we didn't really dance together as adults,
Oh,
but we remained like best friends throughout.
right.
So there's like that relationship is still continued over the years. And then with Tushrik, we met with as I was dancing with Sidra, we danced together in the company for a year, and then we've continued to dance together and be incredibly close friends as well.
Mm,
So I feel like there's something about it's a like co-creations are super challenging.
mm,
And I feel for me personally, what works is having a huge amount of trust and like intimacy, relationship, friendship, honesty in your communication that I
yeah,
feel like I can have it more easily with people I'm really close with.
yeah.
People say collaborations with friends can also get super tricky. Like we all know that. But for me it's been actually really fruitful to collaborate with really close friends. And for me, I feel like what I've said this a lot too recently is like what makes a collaboration feel like a collaboration is when, like, at the end of the day, I don't know whose ideas were whose to begin with. So it's just like a space of saying yes and trying and like feeding off of each other's ideas until it creates something that like neither of you would create alone, and but it's something that you would only create together.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Lavana and Tosh and I are all doing that in terms of these are pieces that I feel like we're taking risks. We each feel like we're taking risks, and it feels like we're taking risks together.
Mm-hmm.
And we all really believe in the work. So it's really special for me to be in that space. Like I have so much appreciation for both of them.
Yeah.
And oh, what else?
The
With
dance lab. Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
Dance
sorry.
Lab.
Yeah.
Yeah, with so Hannah Epperson is who
Yeah.
I'm going to be working with.
Yeah.
Similar, we're very close friends. There's this like I don't know how to describe this, but there's this it feels like magic chemistry when we work together. Like whenever she's played music and I've danced, which has been in other people's projects and our own, it feels really spiritual and it feels really like we I don't know how to put this like succinctly without sounding crazy, but it's like we can just communicate, like it feels like we communicate on another realm.
Mm,
And it's really fun to experience that with a musician. Like really to her core, she's a musician. She's worked with dancers before and everything, but like she's a touring musician. And yeah, we kind of went at this project originally through mostly improvisation because we're both huge improvisers.
mm-hmm.
And that feels like a risk too. But we would just do these really long scores. And still, like this piece we started before the pandemic, and we had 2 weeks together in Wells, BC, in the middle of nowhere. And then we performed what we created at Arts Wells at the festival.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which was really fun because it's more of a music festival.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then COVID hit. Or we also had a week residency at the Banff Center in
Nice.
December.
Oh, 2019?
Yes.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oof.
And so then COVID hit. Hannah and her partner moved out to BC. They were just outside of New York before. They moved out to BC. Hannah now has two babies. She has
Wow.
two kids. And now we're like, okay, now should we talk about starting this project again?
Oh,
So
that's
we've taken a
wonderful.
huge hiatus,
Yeah.
and I'm so excited to come back to the studio now to like already there was an element it felt like an element of motherhood and nurturing in our duet, and
Mhm.
I know her and I want to explore that more. Yeah, we will see. It's kind of unknown. It's like, are we going at this fresh? Are we picking up where we left off? Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I love that you say risk because it comes up a lot when you might feel like you're taking a risk, but this might be a good opportunity to kind of just flush out what we mean by that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like taking risks or raising the stakes in terms of like professionally, do you mean? Like creatively as well? But what is that? Maybe could you describe the moment when you think you're taking a risk and what you might have done to
Yeah.
feel that way?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I'll just say this super bluntly, but it feels like, do I create something that's a crowd pleaser, or do I create something that feels scary to put out there and might not resonate with as many people? And I feel like, I think in the long run, it feels better to put out something that feels true to yourself and feels scary. I feel like even now at OBT, I'm in a it's a ballet, it really is a ballet company, and they do
Yeah,
contemporary work and they're amazing.
yeah,
They're like such incredible dancers, but it feels like, do how much do I play with taking choreographic risks, with creating a piece that is going to propel my career? In what way is it going to propel my career? Like, there's all these things that you balance as an artist professionally that are really tricky.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's moments like these sometimes that you kind of miss having like the mentor, like the person, like the people that are just like, no, like I've been in your shoes, like go
Well,
for it or not,
to some degree, but also there's being that for yourself, right?
Yeah.
There's almost that sense, which is, it sounds like that's where you are, and that's what's so great about the co-creation, is that when somebody knows you and you're working with them, they kind of know what decisions you will make based on what you've already made, like,
Hmm.
and what you've already made together, whether you have created it together or whether you've been dancers in the same company together, so you've been part of the same
Yeah.
process. So there's that, right? And for me, it seems to me that as you've been you're a very accomplished dancer in many companies and you've traveled all over as a dancer, you know when you're taking a risk, when you're not doing something that's similar to what you were doing in other people's work, right?
Yes.
You know that's where the authenticity comes out, or where you feel like you are opening up your expression a little bit more, maybe to an audience in your craft and in your process, because nobody else asked you to do this that you are now doing. It
Yeah.
wasn't what somebody else chose to put on you and ask you to do. And so then you're in the position where you might be asking other people to do something that, and there's a kind of empathy, right, for choreographers that you've danced for before, who've asked you to do something when you've either been really excited by it or gone, why
Yeah.
do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
Why would I?
Yeah. No,
So
it's so true. That's such a beautiful way to put it. Thank you. That's such
well, no, I mean, it's from what you said too, and what I imagine, as a dancer. I've never been a dancer in companies traveling, but I've choreographed a lot around the world, and so I've danced a lot in my life, but not in the same way you have, and not in these ensemble situations, and not for ballet companies. So I always feel like I'm, kind of fantasizing how those processes go in my
Yeah.
mind, because I'm not involved in those, but I know enough on the other side as a creator, for that sense of when something feels like you've done it before, you've seen it before, or when it feels like even that moment where it matches, where what you feel like you need to express matches something that you've seen before. That's the
Yeah.
scariest place for me. That's the
Yeah.
scariest place.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, and it's also like I'm remembering like being back in a Dancer with Cidra's company.
Mm,
She took such risks. Like,
right.
and so it's like remembering that's also where I came from as a dancer, as a professional dancer first.
Yeah.
And it's so inspiring to work for someone who would take those risks. Where
Yeah.
as a dancer, sometimes you're like, you want me to do what? And then you do it and you're like, oh, this feels great.
Wow. Wow. One way is I understood, it was kind of comprehensive and I think I understood. And the other one was, I interpret that in a way that not only felt great, but was kind of welcomed by the choreographer, in some way. Like that's a beautiful place to be, I think. That's an amazing place to be as a
Yeah.
creative person in the world.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah.
that's
And
a
it's
really
fun. I've had even like at Arts Umbrella, I was there just last week,
yeah,
again, rehearsing them for season finale. And
yeah.
one of the dancers was out. She was injured and she was watching. She was like, oh, now I see it. Like, now I get why we're doing this. And she was like, so that was super
Exactly.
affirming. I was like, yeah, you see it now.
Yeah, that's what happened to me when I was working with a group, and one of the dancers seemed to be a little bit like confrontational and a little bit kind of contraire, didn't really want to be involved, and then stepped out. And I don't remember if I asked her to see it from where I was, or if I teased that out, or if she just so happened to be there. But it was exactly the same thing happened to her. She suddenly saw what was going on and really, really understood it and changed from that moment on. She saw it.
Mhm.
She saw the work and she was just in when she went back into it was amazing. It was so wonderful to see. But I feel like those are the kind of people who have this choreographic kind of
Yeah.
desire to that they might not have yet discovered in themselves. But I sometimes feel it. I don't push it, but I feel it in me, and I go, ooh, maybe, maybe
Yeah.
there's another one. Yeah, that's very cool. And honesty, I think, is a really lovely word. I'm playing with that at the moment for myself. But this idea of when you feel like you can be honest with the people that you're working with, that it you always want that, I think, but sometimes that can really take time to build, and so you save time. We're saving time again, right? Working with our friends, and you're not working with all the people you've worked with before. You've formed these relationships through working with many, many people. These are the
Yeah.
ones that have kind of gone, they've just kind of locked in. The magnetism is there, the kind of you've been drawn together to continue to work together. So I think that's a really beautiful thing. And now to Mary Louise Albert and your relationship with your mom and that whole thing. I'd love to just kind of in a nutshell, like, how that has progressed. As you said, you mentioned at the beginning, she was actually your teacher. And I was just in a tap dance class and the teacher's mum was in the class, but also his sister was in the class. So I was dancing next to the mum and the sister of the
Oh my
the
God.
of the son who was teaching, which was really cool. I loved it. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So maybe we
Yeah.
could start where you're working with her now, and move backwards,
Mhm.
or however you want to talk about it, but just as an in, maybe.
Yeah. It's super, I mean, I feel grateful that I had my mom as that she was a dancer.
Mm,
And I growing up, she was always very she was like, if you don't have to do this, like it's really up to you. Like
mm,
there really wasn't pressure for me to be a dancer. I felt like I really found that for myself.
mm.
Also, my dad's two sisters are dancers and choreographers as well. Like Judith
Oh,
Marcuse and Betsy Carson are my aunts, and so it runs deep. And then
yeah.
even this is great. My great aunt was like a pioneer dance teacher in Montreal, and she was
Amazing.
known for being super edgy and like creative and risky.
What was her name?
Sorry, no, Elsie Margolick. No,
Okay.
sorry,
Oh, no.
Elsie Solomons.
So, okay,
Yeah,
right.
like all the Jewish names. I'm
Good
like,
that you like that.
yeah, Elsie Solomons, and so it's like feels really deep in my genes, quite literally.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I'm grateful that there wasn't that, quote unquote dance mom pressure for me.
Yeah.
And we really it was like she was my mom, but she also had an understanding of dance and the career and the field, which has been super helpful for me. And, in terms of making connections, like there's definitely that. Like I was exposed to choreographers and dancers at a young age being
Mm-hmm.
around her. And she also ran Chutzpah Festival for
Mm-hmm.
15
15
years.
years, yeah.
So yeah, there's always been this relationship, but then I've also really forged my own community and path and everything by being in New York. And now since moving to Sontula, she started BC Movement Arts Society.
Yeah.
And with the mission of bringing dance to rural areas in BC. And that's something I've always craved, both as a performer and as just a human. Is like believing that dance and performing arts should be more accessible.
Yeah.
So it's been fun. I've been helping her a lot with that. I've been like from everything from like editing trailers, designing posters, like proofreading grants.
Yeah.
On the ground support, I was like with Arts Umbrella. It's called O'Tour, their third year grad company.
Yeah.
They came up, did a whole tour. I was the like
The
leader,
manager.
tour manager. I'm gonna manage another group coming in the fall.
Great.
So it's been fun. It's actually been fun working together that way. I think we know with the parent being in the same field as your parent working together, it's important to have like mom and daughter time and then like work time. Like similar if you're in a relation, if you work with your partner, it's like
Absolutely.
you carve out the partner, the like working together time, and you carve out like where work is not a part of the conversation in the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's been a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's really sweet. I'm just so proud of her. It's incredible what she does.
Yeah, it's
Like
amazing.
my mom is one of those people that if she wants to do something, she figures a way to do it. It's wild. Yeah, she just makes it happen.
Sounds like your daughter might be quite similar, to be honest.
She works way harder than me, honestly.
But she is maybe a bit more free now, than she doesn't have the Chutzpah festival, and so can kind of engage in that vision part a little more.
Yeah.
And in the beautiful surroundings as well, and invite people there, which makes a big difference, doesn't it? If you're not having to fight, the other things that maybe an urban environment brings or the scale of a festival brings, there's a little bit more creativity in how it can be run, a little bit more like independence for your mum and how she can run it. So yeah, that's really cool. So a little bit more maybe about the Dance Lab, and we can just bring this in. But I also, around the Dance Lab and around collaboration, I think it might be really lovely to just talk a little bit about values and inspirations, or where you are now with that. Just you've already mentioned, and I think that's really beautiful, that you're interested in dance being accessible to more people. You've talked a little bit about the rural environments that you've, performed in. You've done some indoor and outdoor performances, I believe. And, so I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit. And then one thing I do want to mention is Una. I looked up the Una. Is it Una Dance Company?
Yeah.
And what I really love I don't know much about the company, and, and maybe we don't have time to get into that now, but I do really love on the website this idea of an extended family.
Yes, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, and you are on that page as part of the extended family, and you're very much involved in some of the projects as a performer, but you're also a rehearsal director for them. So this is, I'm tying this in because these are all the roles you take on and all the roles you have as an independent artist, and you don't do them all for one company. You do them all, like, you've got all of these strings, to your bow happening. And so, but I just love that idea. And I feel like the extended family part is part of your values and inspiration, and like really building with people, building worlds maybe with people, but also developing relationships and believing in those relationships. And it's just so I think, not to be Psych 101 on this, but I do think that maybe growing up in a dance environment and being surrounded by it so comfortably means that you don't have to question that, right? You have this sense of value of a dance life already. You didn't have a family who were questioning that with you, and many people do, where they. So I wonder if there's a kind of sense of trust, and that has allowed you to trust in those relationships you form in dance as the true relationships. I think that's really lovely. But I just love this idea of extended family, and I think that's kind of also what you're creating.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, and then maybe into like values and inspirations, and then the dance lab, and we'll wrap all of that up together.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I think, yeah, Chuck Wilt's the director, and I just love the way they talk about that because it feels like, especially as a freelancer and from the dancer side, like you're in a project and then you're out. And it's
Mm,
like you still have an emotional tie to the people in the work, but sometimes it just feels like, okay, like see you, I don't know when I'll see you. Like there is, and does your like the work that you've given, does it live on in the piece, does it live on in the environment? And like I have to believe that it does,
mm-hmm,
and it does. So I think it's beautiful to like acknowledge people who have been in the room before you as part of a practice as well. And I do that when I teach. I try to always name like people I've learned from
mm,
or people I'm quoting from. And I guess this is veering into values. I think it's like I feel it's twofold because I think, as like you said, I have so many strings in different places, and I am, to be honest, missing a little bit of this like base, like a dance home.
mm-hmm,
But and it has been challenging because I feel like I feel so close to the people I work with and create with, and even, and it's a different kind of closeness that you build in the studio, like,
yeah.
but it's a yeah, it's a specific kind. And even like I think back, okay, like spending 5 weeks total with the Arts Umbrella dancers, like I care about them so much. Or if I worked with dancers in Costa Rica, like I still think about them. Like I really like, I feel like I have like these heartstrings out towards these dancers. And I was telling the Arts Umbrella kids, we said goodbye, and I was like, I sometimes feel like my career right now is just saying goodbye to people I care about. It's
Right.
like kind of, it gets painful. Like I'm like, I always am like, oh, even 2 days into this process with the dancers here, I already have like a huge amount of like, I just like them. So it's like, and that's a, so in doing that, something I do, a little practice is like in every piece there's usually a few moments that are the same movements or like ideas, like even just a step or two from pieces past.
Mm,
So it's like a game for myself,
mm-hmm,
but it's also like really meaningful to be like, I can see this move here and I can think of this person 3 years ago doing this move. And now
mm-hmm,
I get to see it on this other person.
mm-hmm.
And it's a game I play with myself. And I always tell the dancers too, like, this is from this piece, and this dancer here did this. And that's kind of how I like bridge all these incredible people I've had the privilege to work with together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's like fun for me and too, but I think it also this ties in a bit to values in that I feel like I feel so privileged that I have the opportunity to forge these relationships with people, even if they are just 3 weeks. And I
Mm-hmm,
know so many times we do run into each other again through life. And I really try in the studio, I struggle sometimes with being at the front of the room.
mm,
So, like, I try to lead in a really positive way. I try to allow like humor in the space. I ask a lot of questions. I love input. Like I really try to like deconstruct what it means to be at the front of the room.
mm-hmm,
Of course, there needs to be direction. There needs to be, I need to do my homework. I need to come in with ideas. I need to show up. But I try as much as possible to like to feel, to leave space for the dancers to feel like I trust them
yeah,
so that they can make choices and they can feel safe and explore and take risks
yeah,
because they want to.
nice.
Yeah, as much
Yeah,
as possible. It is still a
yeah,
job at the end of the day, but like
yeah,
it's yeah.
exactly. But I do think there's a sense, what I've learned is this idea of leading from the middle. So
Yep.
even if you're at the front of the room, you imagine that it's the middle of the room, so
Yes.
that it feels less confrontational, and it creates a kind of like sense for me of like not having all of the answers, and being open to things, you know, like being coming at me from behind almost, if I think about being in the middle. So, and yeah, less confrontational, less like, you know, kind of eye to eye. I am looking at you and you have to be looking at me to see where I am looking. It's almost like we're all looking.
Yeah.
I try to work with that idea. I think it kind of works better for me in terms of that necessary leadership position, you know, to put yourself there. And I feel like it's kind of connects to this idea of being okay with the fact that you've prepared so much to be in the room, that you're like, you've prepared for the not knowing so well that you have to at least, you know, you have to also be open for the absolute, like, you know, surprise and unpredictable nature of it too. Yeah, it's a beautiful space to be, isn't it?
It is.
And I think there's no better place for actually learning ways of building trust or learning what trust is than those spaces. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what the intimacy is, I think, too.
Yeah, I love this idea of leading from the middle. I'm going to think about that. Yeah,
it's useful. Sometimes you can get lost. Sometimes people don't know who the leader is in the room for a second, just for a second. But you fix that. The preparation fixes that.
Yeah.
So the dance lab is coming up, and so it will. I believe it's in July. Is that correct?
Yes, we're doing it in July.
And so will you have a week at the dance center? Is that how you're doing it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna do like, I think about 10 days in the studio.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
And will there be a showing that we can experience, or
yes,
there will be? Okay, that's really lovely. So I'm sure. Yeah.
Scheduled for July 25th.
Okay. And it will be on the website and everything for the dance center. So we'll make sure that, you know, the listeners have the updated information if it changes. Yeah,
I've been very day by day the past few months, especially. So I'm like, what's happening in July? No. Yeah, I'm very excited about it.
It's a bit far away. It's several projects away, I think, for you. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm really, really excited. Like, Hannah and I have just been like itching to work together again.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really excited because I've been, in a great way, there's been pressure to create quickly the past little while for me. So I'm really excited to kind of go back into a place where we're exploring and developing and researching and not so worried about producing.
You know, what a rich space, you know, and all of it is, you know, to be going in and out of all of these things. It's just so wonderful. Just the life. The life. Excellent. Okay. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for this. I hope you have a restful evening and a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, such a pleasure to talk with you.
A pleasure. I'll see you soon.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Center, Twitter at Dance Center, and Instagram at The Dance Center BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecenter.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Center podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.